Over on Jaguar Gator 7, a new baseball video is out. In this video, we talk about the time in 1998 that the Chicago Cubs had a major feud with USA Today. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. This man right here is Johnny Unitas. I think it goes without saying that he's one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason, and the accolades with him and his career are so plentiful that if I mention all of them, I would be here literally all day, and this video would be at least 2 hours long. He won 3 MVPs, led the league in passing yards 4 times, led the league in passing touchdowns 4 times, made 10 Pro Bowls, was named an AP First Team All-Pro 4 times. You name it, he's done it. The list goes on and on. And when all was said and done, Unitas finished his 18-year career, spanning 17 seasons in Baltimore from 1956 to 72, and one forgettable season in San Diego in 1973, with 290 passing touchdowns. That's a lot of passing touchdowns. Actually, let me rephrase that. That's way more than just a lot of passing touchdowns, because in 1973, that was the record for most career passing touchdowns, and was more than 40 touchdowns ahead of second place, held at the time by Fran Tarkenton. However, with all 290 passing touchdowns that Unitas threw, plus the few that he had in the postseason, that raises the question, what's the craziest one of them all? Surely by default, one of the 290 or so has to be the most insane of the bunch. And without a doubt, we have our answer, which comes from a Week 3 game during the 1970 season against the Boston Patriots. Because this touchdown pass is a story about a veteran quarterback against a rookie head coach. The veteran quarterback completely disobeying orders and going rogue, and making his head coach absolutely livid and furious, even though the touchdown pass won them the game, and changed the entire complexion not just of the 1970 season, but of NFL history. And when you break it down, it truly is a remarkable story that shows just how good Unitas was and takes you inside his incredible mind. Because more than half a century later, this is the story behind what has to be the craziest touchdown pass in the legendary Hall of Fame career of the great Johnny Unitas. Before I talk about the actual touchdown pass in question, we need some context to understand how the game was going, and most importantly, how Unitas was doing entering this game. Through the first 2 weeks of the 1970 season, there was both good and bad news for the Colts. The good news was that they were sitting at 500, atop the AFC East with a record of 1-1. That might not necessarily sound great, but considering the fact that one of their first 2 games was against the defending Super Bowl champion, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the fact that no other team in the division was better than them, a 1-1 start is not too bad, all things considered. As a side note, to learn more about that Monday night game against the Chiefs from Week 2, which was played under the strangest of circumstances, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, the bad news was that despite being in a halfway decent spot after 2 weeks, it was in spite of quarterback Johnny Unitas, and not because of him. Obviously, Unitas was one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and no one was taking that away from him. But by this point, it seemed as though Father Time had caught up to him, because the 37-year-old quarterback, as you can tell from these lowlights, looked completely washed up to start the season. In Week 1 against the San Diego Chargers, even though the Colts won 16-14, Unitas had nothing to do with that, as he completed just 48% of his passes while throwing no touchdowns and an interception. And in Week 2, which was that Monday night game against the Chiefs, Unitas may have played the worst game of his career, as he went 5 for 15, completing 33% of his passes for 58 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 3 sacks for 30 yards, meaning that he had 28 net passing yards, and an abysmal passer rating of 6.4, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball to the ground on every single play. The Chiefs were up 31-0 on national television before halftime, and Unitas got yanked for backup quarterback and former MVP Earl Morrall, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So when you add up the stats, through the first 2 weeks of the 1970 season, Johnny Unitas was looking awful and was legitimately looking like one of the worst quarterbacks in football. Through 2 weeks, Unitas was 20 for 46, completing 43% of his passes. For some perspective, the league-wide average 1 year before in 1969 in completion percentage was 52.6%, so he was 10 percentage points off the average. He had no touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and had a passer rating of 34.7. For some perspective on how bad that is, among the 20 qualified quarterbacks in the NFL in 1969, the one who had the lowest passer rating was Detroit Lions quarterback Greg Landry, who had a passer rating of 48.3. He was the only one below 50. And here's Unitas, who, if we're going off of 1969 numbers, since that's the last sample size we had, was 14 points worse than the worst quarterback in football, and was posting a passer rating that was about half of what he posted himself in 1969. And because of his poor play, on top of some injury concerns that may or may not have been contributing to that, the Colts and head coach Don McCafferty decided that for week 3, they were going to make a change. Johnny Unitas was out, and the best backup quarterback that the game had ever seen, Earl Morrall, was in. And with that, we head to Harvard Stadium for this week 3 battle between two AFC East teams sitting at 1-1, in what was the first ever meeting between the two ball clubs, since before 1970, they played in 2 completely separate leagues. The Colts were favored in this one by 10 points, as they clearly looked like the better side on paper. And the good news for Baltimore was that, at least from a defensive standpoint, they were showing that. The team's run defense was superb, as the Colts allowed just 60 yards rushing on 3.5 yards per carry, with Carl Garrett, an all-star running back in the AFL from the previous year, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, having just 13 yards rushing on 2.6 yards per carry, being completely held in check. The defensive line was just as good against the pass as they were against the run, as the Colts forced 5 sacks on this day, with those 5 sacks resulting in a loss of 56 yards. And only once on the day did the Colts allow a play to go for more than 20 yards. All things considered, the defense, especially after whatever the heck they were doing in week 2 against the Chiefs, when Kansas City just went wild on them, came to play and definitely did their job. As for the offense, well, not so much, because Earl Morrall was incredibly inefficient back there for the Colts. Sure, he went 11 for 17 and threw a touchdown pass in the second quarter, when he hit Eddie Hinton from 13 yards out for the first points of the game. But past that, he did absolutely nothing and was taking a beating back there, as he couldn't get rid of the ball. During Morrall's time under center, he took 6 sacks and lost 56 yards, meaning that while he was in the game for the first 3+ quarters, the Colts only had 74 net passing yards. It wasn't the first time that the Pats' defensive line gave an opposing quarterback fits that season, as in week 1, Dolphins quarterback Bob Greasy got sacked 7 times. But it didn't make it any less frustrating for Don McCafferty and company. With that in mind, and with the Colts leading the game 7-6 by the slimmest of margins, McCafferty decided that it was time to make a switch. As McCafferty said on the switch, we weren't getting too much done, and Morrall was getting clobbered a few times. This man right here, Johnny Unitas, was going back into the ballgame. Despite getting benched the previous week, and despite not starting this one, he was going to play, and was going to help the Colts come away from here with a victory. However, understandably so, McCafferty didn't exactly trust Unitas, and was putting him in there simply because Morrall was getting killed. For McCafferty, the goal was simple. Hold on to the lead with 2.5 minutes left, and let's get the heck out of here. Just call the plays like I tell you to, and if they don't work, we at least kill some clock, and we can trust our defense to do the job from that point on, as they have been doing for the entire game. However, As you can probably guess by the title of this video, that's not quite what happened. Not even close. Because even though McCafferty set in the play for Unitas to run, Unitas wasn't feeling it. And so, the 37-year-old quarterback decided to go off the grid and switch things up, completely defying his coach's orders. As for the end result, well, you be the judge of that.
And in the end, it was Johnny Unitas who came in and doused the Patriots' flame on a 55-yard pass to number 87, Roy Jefferson, to make the final score Colts 14, Patriots 6.
That's right. For the first time all season, Johnny Unitas threw a touchdown pass. Unfortunately, this is the only angle of the touchdown pass that we have. So you're going to be seeing this clip another 3 or 4 times. So you'll become acquainted with this touchdown over the next few minutes. However, with the Patriots expecting a run on 3rd and 2, Unitas called a play-action pass, found a wide-open Roy Jefferson over the middle, and from there, Jefferson was off to the races. With 2 minutes left, the Colts now led it 14-6, and since there was no 2-point conversion back then, that was, for all intents and purposes, the ball game. It's funny because if this game took place under AFL rules 1 year before, it wouldn't necessarily be ball game, but now it was. Anyways, Unitas, after being the GOAT last week, was the hero this week. He came off the bench and delivered the dagger, and gave the Colts a hard-fought victory on the road to improve to 2-1 and to maintain their hold on first place early on in the AFC East. So what did head coach Don McCafferty have to say about this? Well, he was livid. Absolutely livid. He chewed out Unitas, gave him an earful the moment he got back, and basically said, "How dare you disobey me? You almost cost us the game." Said McCafferty, "I gave him a good chewing out. I told him to run 3 plays and then punt. It could have cost us the ball game. I didn't want to take any chances leading only 7-6. This goes to show you a few things. Number 1, it shows you the lack of faith that McCafferty had in Unitas. And number 2, it shows you what the conservative mindset of coaches was like back in the 1970s. Because holy cow, the idea of someone saying this today seems absurd. There were still 2.5 minutes left, and this was 3rd down. So the Pats have a 2-minute warning and plenty of time to drive down the field and get into field goal range. Which, remember, the goalposts were at the goal line and not at the back of the end zone. So if you wanted to try a super long field goal, you didn't have to go very far to do it. And yet, McCafferty was like, "We have a 1-point lead. Even though a 1st down ends it, I trust our defense." Just insane coaching in that regard to want to concede the drive in a 1-point game with plenty of time left. But in the eyes of Johnny Unitas, he not only knew that the play would work, and not only strongly disagreed with McCafferty's philosophy, but what the heck did he have to lose? He already seemingly lost his starting job tomorrow. And again, Unitas knew that this would work, so why not? Said McCafferty on why Unitas called that play and made that audible, Jefferson had been open on a similar play earlier, and Unitas spotted it. We call the play our Y34, throwing to either the wide receiver or a halfback. It certainly worked at the right time for us. And Unitas said all of this, "That's not the first time I've called a play, nor will it be the last." You've got to be a certain kind of confident to be as successful of a quarterback as Unitas was. And safe to say that this play exemplified that in more ways than one. And I guess this touchdown completely changed McCafferty's mind, because the following week, Unitas was back in the starting lineup and started every game for Baltimore the rest of the way, and played pretty well in the process. Again, over the first 2 weeks of the season, Unitas was terrible, and he'll be the first to tell you, as he was one of the worst quarterbacks in football. But over the final 12 games of the season, he had a passer rating of 70.2, well above the league-wide average, and he threw 14 touchdown passes, playing efficient and, for the most part, smart football. Not only that, but with him under center, the Colts not only won the AFC East, but made it to the Super Bowl, and eventually won the big game by defeating the Dallas Cowboys at Super Bowl V, with Unitas throwing 4 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions during the postseason. For one more time in his career, Unitas was on top of the football world. And to think that none of this would have happened if not for that Week 3 game against the Patriots and that audible that he called. It's funny because usually disobeying your coach gets you benched. In the case of Unitas, however, it got him his job back and showed his coach what he could do and what he was capable of. If it wasn't for Unitas audibling the play, who knows what happens the rest of the way? Maybe Morrill keeps the starting job and the Colts don't win the Super Bowl. Maybe the Colts even go on and lose the game against the Pats, since they get stuffed on 3rd down with the Patriots stuffing the line, and the Pats get the ball back and drive down the field to kick the game-winning field goal. And with that, and the Pats getting this win, the Saints get the #1 pick now in the NFL draft, and they take Jim Plunkett, and Archie Manning is a Patriot. It's absolutely crazy the domino effect that comes from this one play that's been forgotten in NFL history. Because when you consider that, consider the defiance and disobedience of Johnny Unitas, and consider what all of that led to, this game-winning touchdown against the Patriots definitely had to be the craziest touchdown pass of Johnny Unitas' storied career. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.